It has been said that memory is distorted by imagination, and I believe the crux of recollection is distortion. Maybe it's just the mental fog of protection, or perhaps it's just one more dead brain cell via our past vices or current devices. Either way, recalling a distant day rarely comes with any type of clarity or perfect truth. So when we see a zombie represented on screen or in any type of media, I always think it is funny that they are a distorted version of what they were in the past. The walking distortion, if you will. In this inaugural episode, I want to tell you about the butcher's block and what it felt like to be cut into during my first heart-splitting experience, and the monster it helped birth. Not every episode of the show will be so literal, I promise. In fact, I'll be doing some fun deep dive retrospectives on music, video games, movies, TV shows, and lots of other pop culture darkness that needs to be a revenant from its grown over grave. Or I might just give you a reason to go visit said headstones where you can dig up the bodies for yourself. Diseases like mine are complicated. I believe I had hit puberty before I could even pronounce all 4 of my conditions regarding this busted up heart of mine. So in the interest of storytelling, I will not try to bore you with a whole bunch of medical terminology describing the congenital heart disease I was blessed with. Although there's some vocabulary that might be necessary for pinpointing reasons in my tumultuous timeline, you can rest assured that most of this will be from a narrative reflection from my decades hence since point of view. I want people to remain anonymous when it comes to friends, family members, and a few others, as they have accompanied me on many of the events within the stories that will be on this podcast. I have also, in some cases, changed their names and relationships to the subject matter. However, their influence, for better or worse, will be told. So, as we have now established, because of the faulty human mind, it is impossible for this tale to be an actual recounting of events, though it is based on a true story. So let's just call it a retrospective on a trauma, now back from the dead, as told by me, Johnny Stitches. The dramatic change would hit in the months between December 1992 and June 1993. My little unexpected 7-year-old pop culture brain was too naive and innocent to notice. I was busily caught in an obsessive throw between Batman the Animated Series released that past fall and the upcoming Mighty Max TV show that was going to release in the autumn of 93. Come to think of it, Mighty Max could use its own episode of this show in the future. You see, I was obsessed with those toys. They were like Polly Pocket, but for boys. I was also in love with Hot Wheels, Legos, my dogs, and music. MTV was church for me, and service was every night and all weekend long. I'll always stand by the fact that music saved me through every bit of my butchery. I had been in and out of hospitals for as long as I could even remember. But I had never had my breastbone cracked open. That was, of course, going to end that year. And I knew that. I knew it because my mother and my father were always candid when explaining what was happening to me. I was always in the room with the doctors and the surgeons when they talked about prep, procedure, and recovery. For better or worse, I was always there when they spoke of survival rates and mortality rates. Those rates have changed a lot through the years. Before 1955, you had less than a 50% chance of surviving any type of heart surgery. Fast forward a few years, and it had already decreased to less than a 25% chance of mortality. These days, you're looking at 40,000 plus heart surgeries yearly in the United States and around a 96 to 97% survival rate. So yes, the medical advancements in cardiac science have been truly remarkable over the last 50 years. And the Rostelli repair I was to undergo had thousands of positive outcomes and proven results. But this is not a heart surgery podcast, and those percentages/words were too complex for my 7-year-old soul to consume appropriately. Tuesday, December 29th, 1992. The plans for my personal D-Day were laid in motion. Unfortunately, I would listen on as the doctors exclaimed that there was over an 80% chance of survival. And I only heard that there was almost a 20% chance of death. And thus my mortality complex was born. Though it was not yet kicking and screaming, it was alive. I remember that I cried the whole way home. It was after all a long drive from Houston's medical center to our little lakeside trailer house. My parents did their best to comfort me in my confusion and fear. Throughout our 96-mile journey north, they stopped at Red Lobster and Toys R Us. And even then, I knew we couldn't afford any toys. But it was still fun to look at what was new. Commercials were cool and all, but seeing them in their packages, man, that was totally awesome. With my belly full of shrimp scampi and Shirley Temple Sprite, I fell fast asleep for the remainder of the car ride. When I awoke, my newfound misery started to seep back in, but it was soon forgotten once I saw my dog's wagging tail and laid in my humble room, surrounded by all my prized, and maybe just a little bit broken, toys. Yes, let's just lie there for a moment with the younger me. My eyes closed at first, then opened again as I laid there staring up at my water-stained ceiling. The sounds of the East Texas forest coming through the screen window with a light breeze. Only a slight chill to the wind, because it's still Texas. December rarely has much power against the lake's humidity and the Gulf Coast's heat. My little freckle face was tear-stained by fear, but soothed by this place. My room. My sanctuary, my home. Let's pause in this peace. Do you feel it? I hope so. Because from here, the next part of our story gets very dark. If you know someone that's been through heart failure or heart disease in their lifetime, you might have heard of a cardiac catheterization procedure. Places like the Mayo Clinic and other online sources will describe the operation in a very gentle way. Something usually to the tune of, it's a common procedure that is used to diagnose heart problems. This is completely true, and as I've described already, is part of an amazing medical breakthrough of the modern era. However, to a kid, it's worse than surgery. In the early 90s, they were performed by keeping the patient lightly sedated. So I was awake when hold on, this next part might make some people a little squeamish. I'll try not to be too gory, but that's history, isn't it? So I was awake when they would insert one of my groin pit areas with this flexible tube that was guided through a blood vessel in my upper thigh all the way to my heart. Yep, discomfort and painfulness were indeed understatements. It freaking hurt. And the psychological effect of the procedure are still with me to this day. I've had 33 of them to date. Again, I want to reiterate that they are fantastic medical tools for diagnosing. They help locate narrowing and blockages in the blood vessels, and they can measure pressure and oxygen levels in all parts of the heart. They can take tissue samples, and they can examine for blood clots. Truly modern magic. But to my young soul, it was dark magic, one that would make it hard to walk for days. After my first open heart surgery, I used to tell people that I'd rather go through 30 more of those surgeries than have one more heart cath. Why did I experience so many of them? Well, I had many heart problems as a child. Like a lot. And the procedure was super accurate. But the honest answer to the 33 punctured is more technical. They would go through the left groin area, other times they would go through the right groin area, And on some really bad days, they'd go through both. I had enough scar tissue in that area alone to write 3 Red Hot Chili Pepper albums. My sense of humor has been surgically crafted and is laced with tons of sarcasm and cynicism. But I did not have those weapons at this age. The heart cath was something that I couldn't shake off. Something that would make me convulse just thinking about it. Luckily, in my later years, I could have my headphones on and listen to music and have it take me away from the reality of those awful operations. There was something quite poetic about being sedated lucily and listening to a tape of Injustice for All by Metallica on my beat-up old black Casio portable cassette player. My orange spongy headphones were like angel wings wrapped around my ears. Now, going back to December 29th, 1992, with the planning for Operation D-Day. Here's an excerpt from the letter my cardiologist wrote and faxed to my pediatrician. We have delayed surgical intervention on John in the hopes that we could get him to a size where an adult conduit could be implemented in a Rostelli-type repair. I believe that we have achieved that age and the size in John at the present time. For this reason, I would anticipate that surgical repair be performed sometime in the relatively near future. He further stated, after discussion with John's mother, we have tentatively planned to have John admitted on June 6, 1993 for cardiac catheterization and on June 7th for surgery per David Ott. In the meantime, no changes will be made to his medications. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in John's care. Should any questions arise regarding his medical management, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Timothy F. Feltis, MD, Assistant Professor of Pediatrics and Internal Medicine. So began the myriad of doctor's appointments between my second semester of school, church, and what little time I had left at home. All 4 avenues of my life were competing in a dramatic 4-way game of tug-of-war for my then stitchless heart. Stitchless heart. Yeah. I don't have many memories of my chest without a scar, and there are very few photos of me shirtless as a child. There is one, though. The day I was born. It is of my father holding me before my first heart cath. That's right, number 1 of the 33 catheterizations was on my very first day of life. Welcome to existence, little guy. Good thing you packed your redheaded pain tolerance. And as a father, I can't imagine what my dad had to go through. Riding with me in the ambulance from Northwest Memorial Hospital to the fledgling Texas Children's Establishment in the medical center. How my mother coped with her brand new baby being ambulanced away, miles and miles away, while she stayed there, healing from birth. The nurse telling my father, we should take a photo. This will be the only time your child will be completely unscarred. And luckily enough, through the various shunt stents and catheterizations, they did keep my chest clear for a while. Though my rib cage and lower shoulders and groin area took the beating, my heart remained free from the sutures. That time was up, though. For well over 7 years, my breastbone had remained unbroken as it protected my heart from the scalpel's life-saving song. And that song was to be sung, and the first instrument to be played was the needle. I would eventually write a song called Where the Needles Sleep, for that's what I felt. I was a pincushion, something to be poked and prodded. Even at this age, I felt this way. And as I got older, my feelings would get darker, a lot darker. However, my, at the time, Baptist belief and trust in God and heaven were my allies in this first endeavor. I prayed so much, and I was prayed for by so many. I was also in the hands of some of the most talented cardiac doctors in the world. Everything seemed on my side. The needles grounded my innocent optimism, though. Even though I had been in so many surgeries before and was no stranger to their metal bite, I was woefully unprepared for the amount of puncturing and the size of the needles that laid in my forthcoming surgical battle. I don't know if it was isoflurane or ketamine or something else, but it burned. I remember it looked really orange going through the tubes, and it felt as if my veins were on fire. The anesthetic set in, and I started to wane from consciousness, and I thought, I don't care if I die. I just don't want it to hurt. I thought that over and over. God, please, don't let this hurt. Finally, my fear gave way to sleep. Sweet, sedated solace. My dream was a weird one under the clouds of sedation. I remember seeing them pull my heart from my chest, move it over to a steel table, and work on it. That didn't happen, of course, even though it is what I told most of my schoolyard friends, and unfortunately, one of my elderly neighbors before they went under for bypass surgery. Then I drifted into a field with a tree in it. This was an abandoned string of lots that was between my house and the really cool yellow two-story house of our more financially sound neighbor. This was the same field that would return to me in the dream I had during my second open heart surgery at the age of 11, but with a different hellscape added. However, that's a tale for another day. This field was warm and heavenly, like comfort filling up every sense. Then the proverbial tunnel of light appeared. Seriously. And I thought I was going to meet God. But before I could ascend to this plane, I heard my dog barking, and she was running to me. We met in the grass and rolled around for what felt like hours. Then all at once, the harmony of the scene was broken, and the sky began to darken, and the sense enveloping comfort fiercely faded. Then I awoke. And I awoke too early. Nothing could have prepared me for the hellscape that I awoke into. The tubes, the needles, the breathing machine, the bandages, the blood, the stains, and what I could barely see over the plastic apparatus that was on my face. The scar. The iodine bandage-soaked bloody scar that was now on my chest. I tried to talk, but couldn't. I tried to scream, but couldn't. I still belonged to the machine at the moment. The noisy machine that was rhythmically keeping me alive while I was asleep. But I was not asleep. I was alone. The doctors had told my parents I would be out for a while, a long while. So after all the hours of waiting while I was in surgery and the hours of waiting while I was in the ICU, they finally broke away to get something to eat. No one could have known I would wake up that early, but I did. I've often heard something about being a ginger and your tolerance to anesthetics and pain medication. I don't subscribe to this belief myself, but sometimes things like this put it in a different perspective. Sometime later, what felt like an eternity, the breathing tube was removed from my throat and my crusted over lips. Then a thirst, as I've only felt 3 times in my life, kicked in for the first time ever, and I truly understood what dehydration was. The nurse then informed my parents and me that I could only have ice chips, and I could only have a few of those once every 10 minutes. So with a thin, quickly dissolving piece of ice sitting in my mouth, I looked around the room and then down at the wreckage that was my body. Though it was a gore fest, I couldn't feel anything. One of the intravenous needles was morphine-filled, and it was doing its job very well. Yet, something did catch my eye. A single tube below the base of my scar and about 3 inches above my navel. It was close to a penny in diameter, and it was kind of transparent so that I could see the specks of blood mixed with a thick, viscous fluid that was being pulled from my body and into the bedside machine. One of the first questions I asked when my cognitive functions fully returned was the purpose. The doctor told me it was to keep the fluid off my lungs and heart, with a simple answer for a simple thing. But that drain tube would traumatize me for a lifetime during its removal. I was watching Looney Tunes on a CRT television mounted to the ceiling when the door opened. I even remember which episode I was watching. The pain that accompanied the tube extraction clarified everything in that room at that moment. The nurses held me tight, some on my arms, others on my legs. I wasn't resisting because I wanted that horrible tube out of me. I would have been more defiant if I had known the extreme pain it would cause. A nurse with dark black hair said, "Sweetie, we're going to need you to hold your breath when we pull." And another nurse exclaimed how important it was not to breathe in because the tube could cause more damage. I even saw my mom's eyes widen at that statement. Then the countdown began. 1, is this going to hurt? 2, why are they gripping into me harder? 3, I can hold my breath. I can hold my breath. The tube only took milliseconds to exit my sternum, but it matured me by decades. My teeth were clenched, and I was still holding my breath as I started to seize up from the pain. A red-headed nurse, who hadn't spoken until that moment, said, "You need to breathe, honey." I should have closed my eyes and looked away. Instead, the faint air I was holding released, quickly turning into a violent scream. The shock of seeing the tube's contents splatter on my waist and on the bed sheets, mixed with the pain that I would later learn is equal to the impact of being shot, well, it overloaded my mind and I entered a frenzied state. Their grip on me tightened and became more demanding as they tried to suture the small hole against all my jostling. My nerves started recalling what they had just endured. A tube that, in my imagination, had sprang out Freddy Krueger claws and dragged through my flesh the whole way out. I cried for justice from the only person any child thinks can save them. My mother looked helplessly on, and I freaked out, screaming, "Mommy!" pleading for her to make them stop. When she didn't, my screams turned to a ferocious, fiery, and frantic blame. Finally, a little more morphine was dispatched to me during my fit, and seconds later, I had calmed. But that storm still rages in my mind to this day, and it was only the first of 3 times I would experience the drain tube's violent rain. The mind is a wondrous enigma. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast, but I can recall my first experience of having a drain tube pulled out from over 30 years ago like it happened this morning. Oh, and if you're wondering, it was Hair-Raising Hair, the Looney Tunes episode. That was the one I was watching on the TV when they entered my hospital room. The one where Bugs Bunny unknowingly follows a pretty female robot rabbit back to the evil Dr. Lore's castle so he can feed bugs to his big sneaker-wearing red monster. From here, the only 7-minute, 19-second short continues with lots of 1940s cartoon shenanigans, like Bugs stopping the monster from killing him by trying to do his nails. The monster's name was not given at this point in the Looney Tunes canon, but like most monsters, he's been called many names. The first was in 1952 in the short called Water, Water, Every Hair, where he was called Rudolph by a different mad scientist named Dr. Moron, also known as Dr. Frankenbeans. But he wouldn't get his canonical name until around November 20th, 1980, in the short Duck Dodgers and the Return of a 24th Century, where we hear Marvin the Martian ask the Dodgers to go visit the boudoir of Gossamer. And that's where we would see the decades-forgotten Looney Tune monster reemerge. He would then stay in our culture zeitgeist from then on. Most notably in 1996's Space Jam, where his McDonald's exclusive stuffed toy would actually be at my bedside when I entered my second open heart surgery. Not by a plan, just by happenstance. We all have some sort of clandestine monster. I guess Gossamer was mine. I don't recall what place in hair-raising hair I was at when they turned down the TV's volume to start the drain tube extraction. But I do remember at what point it was in the cartoon when they pulled the tube out. It was at the 2 minutes and 37-second mark, right when the door opens and the doctor lets the monster out. This episode of Back from the Dead was written and produced by me, Johnny Stitches, with episode music by Eon Code. Thank you so much for joining me on this first inaugural episode. And if you like what I'm doing here, you might check out my anthology horror series at hearingthehaunted.com or my serialized horror series at cybernicide.com. Back from the Dead is made possible by those passionate Cybernicide patrons. If you join our Scarred Ones, you will get access to amazing merch, shoutouts on the shows, and most importantly, it'll keep the show from becoming a ghost. For more, check out patreon.com/cybernicide. That's SIRENICIDE. We are grateful for any support you can give, for without you guys, the show wouldn't be possible. You can rate and review us in your favorite podcast app or give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Back from the Dead merch is out there as well. It's on the Cybernicide store at tpublic.com/cybernicide. And we have some super comfortable shirts there. Stay up to date on everything. You can follow me on Twitter at Johnny Stitches. You can follow me on Facebook at Johnny Stitches. You can join our Facebook group by going to groups and searching for Cybernicide. On Instagram, I'm Johnny.Stitches. And on YouTube, right now, I'm 9-Volt Recordings. But the new handles are coming, so hopefully I'll have a Stitches one there soon. Again, thanks for joining in, and I hope you'll come back from wherever you are next time. And now, for the thing. All elements of Back from the Dead are copyright 2022 by Atrium Dynamics unless otherwise stated. Any duplication or use of this production without the written consent of Atrium Dynamics is prohibited. Please visit JohnnyStitches.com for more details.